Have you ever wondered why the universe would bestow divine power upon someone who refuses to fight? What happens when the gentlest warrior carries within him the most destructive force? In the history of the Holy Wars, there exists a truth that has remained in shadow, a secret the gods themselves feared to reveal. And this truth speaks of chains that don't imprison, but liberate, of tears that don't symbolize weakness, but transcendental power, of a heart that doesn't break in battle, but breaks the very structure of reality. Shun of Andromeda, the saint who wept, the warrior who hesitated, the brother who forgave. As we grew up, many of us judged him as the weak link among the bronze saints, a soul too pure for the bloody battlefield of the 12 houses. But what if that perception was exactly what the narrative wanted us to believe? What if, between the lines of every hesitation, of every tear shed, was encoded the deepest message of the entire SaintSeiya cosmos? The Andromeda chains are not mere weapons. They are physical manifestations of a metaphysical truth that transcends the very concept of combat. When they move, it isn't just cosmic metal cutting through air, it's the very web of destiny being rewritten. When they defend, it isn't just a shield, it's a fundamental declaration about the nature of true power. What happens when the warrior, with the greatest destructive potential, chooses to contain his own power, not out of fear, but out of a love so profound it transcends the cycle of violence itself? Remember the moments when Shun's chains acted of their own accord. The narrative called it protection, a simple mechanical response of cosmo-energy. But look deeper. When did any other cloth, any other weapon in the entire series demonstrate consciousness? What if those chains weren't responding to external threats, but restraining something from within? What if the Andromeda cloth wasn't chosen for Shun? What if Shun was chosen for it? The sacred texts of the sanctuary speak of a power that predates the gods, a force so pure it can either heal the universe or unmake it. They speak of a vessel, a saint whose heart must be forged through suffering, yet remain untainted by hatred. A warrior who must know the depths of pain, yet choose mercy over vengeance, time and time again. A being who must stand at the precipice of rage, feel its call deep within his soul, and still turn away. Not once, but every moment of every battle. There's a reason why Hades, lord of the underworld, ancient deity of unfathomable power, chose Shun as his vessel. It wasn't random. It wasn't convenience. It was recognition. What better home for a god of death than the body of a saint who had mastered life's greatest mystery, the strength to withhold power rather than unleash it? What better irony than to corrupt the purest soul? But what the dark god never understood was that Shun's purity wasn't naivety. It was a hard-won wisdom that even immortals had failed to grasp. Think back to every battle Shun reluctantly entered. Notice the pattern that was hidden in plain sight. His opponents weren't merely defeated, they were transformed. From the brutal Hydra Ichi who first faced the Nebula chain to the savage fighters of the Galactic Tournament, how many enemies became allies after facing Shun? His battles didn't end in death, they ended in revelation. While other saints fought with destructive force, Shun fought with redemptive light. The difference wasn't in power level, it was in purpose. The myth of Andromeda tells of a princess chained to a rock, sacrificed to appease a sea monster. But there's a deeper reading of this ancient story. The chains represent binding, not of a victim, but of a power too great to be unleashed. The sacrifice isn't of life, but of potential dominance. What if Shun's character was written as the true embodiment of this myth? Not as the princess awaiting rescue, but as the storm itself, voluntarily bound to protect those around it? Every time Shun declared his reluctance to fight, the audience was led to perceive weakness. But listen to those words again. I don't want to hurt you. Not I cannot hurt you. Not I fear hurting you. But I don't want to hurt you. The distinction is crucial. It's not inability, it's choice, and choice requires power. You cannot choose to withhold what you do not possess in the first place. Every tear Shun shed wasn't for his own pain, it was for the agony he could inflict, but refused. The delicate features that made him the subject of misguided jokes among casual viewers. These weren't design flaws, but deliberate subversions. In a genre built on hypermasculine displays of power, Shun stood as a revolutionary statement. True strength doesn't need to roar. True power doesn't need to posture. The mightiest force in the cosmos can exist within the gentlest heart, and that juxtaposition isn't contradiction. It's the highest harmony. When Ikki, the Phoenix Saint, returned from Death Queen Island, transformed by hatred, who was the only one who could reach him? When the Bronze Saints faced extinction-level threats whose chains provided both offense and defense? When every battle descended into brutal chaos, who maintained perfect clarity? These weren't coincidences. They were signposts pointing to a truth too significant to be stated explicitly. The narrative wasn't undermining Shun. It was elevating him beyond conventional heroism. His famous reluctance to kill didn't stem from moral superiority or childish idealism. It came from understanding that even Athena herself hadn't fully grasped. In a universe where cycles of violence perpetuated across millennia, where gods and humans repeated the same patterns of destruction, Shun alone recognized the futility. He wasn't a pacifist because he couldn't fight. He chose peace because he saw what others didn't. That cosmos-shaking power untempered by compassion leads only to more elaborate forms of ruin. Consider this. Andromeda Shun survived battles with Gold Saints. His chains withstood forces that could shatter stars. His body endured cosmic assaults that should have destroyed him 100 times over. Was this merely plot armor, or was something far more significant happening? What if every seemingly miraculous survival wasn't luck, but evidence of a latent power so vast it protected him even when unconscious? The nebula chain and spiral chain, in their defensive and offensive forms. What are they really? Ancient texts in the sanctuary spoke of weapons that channel their wielder's true nature. The square chain that forms an absolute defense reveals Shun's unbreakable spirit. The circular chain that seeks out enemies like consciousness itself shows his inescapable perception. They aren't tools, they're manifestations of a saint whose understanding of cosmos transcended the physical and touched something eternal. Look, again at the moment Hades' soul attempted to consume Shun from within. Any other human would have been instantly overwhelmed. Even mighty gods feared the lord of the underworld. Yet Shun's soul fought back, not with hatred or fear, but with a light so fundamental it predated darkness itself. This wasn't an ordinary possession thwarted by friendship and willpower. This was cosmic recognition, a god of death confronting its opposite force embodied and finding itself unable to corrupt what it couldn't comprehend. The journey of Andromeda Shun begins like most of the Bronze Saints, in tragedy and loss, orphaned, separated from his brother, subjected to training that would break most adults. Yet while others emerged hardened, Shun maintained something that the brutal system of saint training should have extinguished: his fundamental compassion. The conventional reading suggests this compassion survived despite his training. The truth reveals it survived because it was too powerful to break. Not a weakness the system failed to purge, but a strength no system could touch. Look closely at Shun's master, Albior of Cepheus. Among all the training masters, he alone seemed to recognize something different in his pupil. While other masters forced their students to attack, Albior taught Shun defense first. While others emphasized killing techniques, he showed Shun how to subdue without harm. This wasn't mercy or softness, it was recognition. Albior saw what burned within Shun's soul and understood. This flame wasn't meant to destroy. It was meant to illuminate, to transform, to transcend the very cycle of conflict the saints were bound to repeat. The Andromeda cloth-choosing ceremony remains one of the most revealing moments in Shun's journey. Unlike other cloths that simply acknowledge their saints, the Andromeda cloth tested Shun by binding him in chains and submerging him in poisoned water. Many interpret this as a reenactment of the Andromeda myth, but consider the deeper significance. The cloth wasn't testing if Shun could survive. It was testing if he could endure being bound, if he could accept limitation of his true power. The chains weren't rejecting him. They were asking a cosmic question. Will you accept restraint as your path? When Shun first appeared in the galactic tournament, his reluctance to fight wasn't fear, it was foresight. Every other combatant saw only the immediate battle. Shun alone perceived the pattern, the cycle of violence that solved nothing. When forced to fight, he didn't simply defeat opponents, he awakened them. Geki of Bear walked away, not just beaten, but questioning his understanding of strength. This pattern would repeat throughout the series. Shun's victories weren't demonstrations of superior force, but moments of spiritual revelation for his opponents. The infamous "I don't like to fight" line became almost a mantra through the series, often misunderstood by casual viewers. But this wasn't the complaint of a reluctant warrior. It was the recognition of a spiritual adept who saw the inadequacy of combat itself. Shun didn't dislike fighting because he feared pain. He understood something more profound, that every battle, no matter how righteous, carries the seed of the next conflict. His reluctance wasn't character weakness. It was narrative wisdom, speaking directly through him. When the saints faced the Black Phoenix's shadow warriors, dark reflections of themselves, every saint struggled against their doppelganger, except Shun. His battle with Black Andromeda revealed something crucial. There cannot be a dark reflection of what has already integrated its own shadow. Shun's gentle exterior wasn't separate from his power. It was the perfect expression of it. The chains that seemed defensive to others were, in his hands, the perfect counter to corruption itself. Not because they were special metal, but because they were wielded by a consciousness that understood both light and darkness. The journey to the sanctuary marked a turning point where Shun's power could no longer remain completely hidden. Against the Silver Saints, warriors with powers far beyond normal Bronze Saints, Shun demonstrated abilities that defied explanation. His chains moved at light speed. They sensed killing intent before it manifested. They formed defensive barriers that withstood attacks that should have atomized them. These weren't just techniques of a well-trained saint. They were glimpses of something dwelling within Shun that the narrative itself seemed reluctant to fully acknowledge. Consider the battle with Aphrodite of Pisces, one of the deadliest gold saints. His poison should have been absolute, his power overwhelming. Yet Shun not only survived, but demonstrated a cosmic awareness few others achieved. When his brother Ikki arrived, the conventional reading suggests he came to save Shun. But watch closely. Shun wasn't being defeated. He was holding back. Even at the brink of death, he sought a solution that wouldn't require destroying his opponent. Not because he couldn't, but because he understood that every time he unleashed his full power, he moved one step closer to becoming what he most feared. The nebulous stream and rolling defense techniques reveal something profound about Shun's true nature. These weren't simply attacks, they were manifestations of a cosmos that understood connection itself. The stream didn't simply bind opponents, it created relationship where only opposition existed before. The defense didn't just block, it redirected energy back to its source. In a series filled with techniques designed to dominate and destroy, Shun's abilities alone focused on the principle of return, of bringing completion to what was fragmented, of restoring balance rather than imposing will. During the Poseidon arc, when the Bronze Saints faced extinction-level threats from a god, each saint received armor that supposedly elevated them close to Gold Saint level. Yet even among these divine protections, Shun's Andromeda demonstrated unique properties. It adapted, it anticipated. At crucial moments, it acted with what appeared to be its own consciousness. The conventional explanation was that this was simply the will of Athena. But what if it was recognition? What if the divine cosmos within that armor recognized something equally divine within Shun himself? The moment Hades chose Shun as his vessel stands as the most explicit acknowledgement of what had been implicit throughout the series. The Lord of the Underworld, a primal god of immense power, didn't randomly select a human body. He recognized perfect resonance. But what the Dark God failed to understand was that Shun's purity wasn't innocence or naivety. It was achieved state. It wasn't the absence of darkness, but the transcendence of the very duality that Hades himself represented. This wasn't a vessel empty of identity, waiting to be filled. This was a soul that had already achieved what gods still sought. When Shun's friends attempted to save him from Hades' possession, something remarkable happened, something the conventional narrative glosses over. Shun wasn't simply a passive victim rescued by his friends. His consciousness fought back against a god from within. No other human in the series demonstrated this level of spiritual integrity. Not even the mighty Gold Saints could resist divine will imposed upon them. Yet Shun, the supposedly weakest Bronze Saint, held a god at bay through sheer force of his uncompromised identity. The Wailing Wall incident reveals yet another layer of Shun's hidden nature. When the Bronze Saints reached the boundary that no human should be able to cross, each contributed their blood to perform a miracle. But look carefully at how the narrative frames Shun in this moment. While others offered blood as sacrifice, Shun offered blood as continuation, not surrendering life, but extending it beyond conventional boundaries. His contribution wasn't separate from his fundamental nature. It was the perfect expression of it, the ability to transcend limitations through self-giving rather than self-assertion. Throughout the series, Shun's Cosmo is repeatedly described with unique terminology. While other saints burn, rage, or explode with power, Shun's Cosmo expands. This isn't merely stylistic variation in writing, it's a fundamental statement about the nature of his power. The others exemplify power as force exerted. Shun alone demonstrates power as space created, not pushing outward against resistance, but opening inward to unlimited potential. His cosmos doesn't dominate the space around him, it rewrites the rules of that space altogether. The visual symbolism throughout the series reinforces this hidden truth. Shun is frequently bathed in light that doesn't radiate outward destructively, but illuminates from within. His chains move not with the rigid patterns of weaponry, but with the organic fluidity of consciousness itself. His eyes, windows to the soul, reflect not the warrior's determination to conquer, but the sage's commitment to comprehend. Even his iconic pink hair serves as visual shorthand for something the narrative couldn't explicitly state: that this character exists outside the conventional spectrum of power as understood within the genre. Consider how Shun's victories differ fundamentally from those of the other saints. Seiya overcomes through perseverance, Shiryu through sacrifice, Hyoga through transcending his past, Ikki through sheer force of will. All follow recognizable hero patterns, but Shun's victories defy conventional narrative structure. His opponents don't simply fall, they awaken. They don't merely surrender, they transform. This isn't just character quirk or fighting style, it's evidence of a power operating on a different level entirely, one that doesn't defeat opposition but converts. The relationship between Shun and his brother Ikki reveals another layer of this hidden power. The conventional reading sees Ikki as Shun's protector, the strong brother defending the gentle one. But look deeper. Who truly saved whom? Ikki, consumed by hatred and rage, found his humanity again through one thing only: his connection to Shun. The Phoenix Saint, who could survive death itself, still needed Shun's light to remember what was worth surviving for. This wasn't coincidence or mere family bonds. It was evidence of Shun's true function in the cosmic order. When the saints face Thanatos and Hypnos, gods of death and sleep, each is overwhelmed by power that transcends human comprehension. Yet Shun endures longer than should be possible. The superficial reading suggests this is simply protagonist protection, the narrative keeping a character alive for story purposes. But the truth is more profound. Shun's existence itself represents something these death gods cannot easily erase, a quality of being that persists even when the physical form is broken, a light that doesn't fight darkness, but precedes it. Throughout the series, Athena is presented as the goddess of wisdom and just war, divine protection embodied. Yet look carefully at what Shun represents in this cosmic framework. If Athena is divine protection through righteous battle, Shun manifests divine protection through righteous restraint. He isn't separate from Athena's principles. He embodies their most evolved expression, the understanding that true victory doesn't come from destroying enemies, but from transforming the very conditions that create them. He isn't fighting in Athena's shadow, he's illuminating what even she is still learning. The rolling defense technique deserves special attention in understanding Shun's true nature. Unlike other defensive techniques in the series that simply block or absorb attacks, the rolling defense returns energy to its source. This isn't merely tactical ingenuity, it's cosmic principle manifest. In a universe governed by action and reaction, Shun alone demonstrates the transcendent principle that giving back is more powerful than holding against. That completion of cycles, not breaking of them, reveals the highest order of power. When facing gold saints in the sanctuary, each bronze saint had to transcend their limitations through extraordinary will and sacrifice. For Seiya, Shiryu, and the others, this meant pushing beyond human limits through desperation and need. But observe how differently Shun's transcendence manifests. His power elevations never appear as explosive breakthroughs, but as veil-lifting moments. Not becoming something he wasn't before, but revealing something that was always present. His power-ups don't transform him. They simply remove another layer concealing his true nature. The visual direction during Shun's key battles contains subtle cues easily missed. While other saints are typically shown with dynamic camera angles emphasizing motion and impact, Shun's most powerful moments are often filmed in stillness. The animation slows, the background fades, and focus narrows to his unwavering eyes. This isn't directorial inconsistency, it's visual language communicating a fundamental truth, that Shun's power doesn't exist in kinetic expression, but in potential energy, in the infinite force of absolute stillness that precedes and succeeds all movement. Throughout the series, each saint develops signature techniques that reflect their elemental affinities. Seiya's meteoric punches, Hyoga's ice constructs, Shiryu's roaring dragon imagery. Shun's techniques alone carry cosmic rather than elemental symbolism. The nebula chain, the spiral chain. These aren't terrestrial metaphors, but universal principles embodied. They don't represent mastery over an element of nature, but harmony with the fundamental patterns of creation itself. His weapons don't symbolize dominance over a fragment of reality, but alignment with the whole. The Andromeda cloth's dual nature, defensive chains that become offensive weapons when needed, has symbolic significance beyond tactical versatility. It represents the perfect balance between receptivity and activity, between yielding and advancing. In a narrative filled with warriors whose powers express singular principles, Shun alone embodies unification of opposites. His strength isn't found in extremity but in harmony, not in becoming the most powerful exemplar of a single principle, but in transcending the illusion of principled opposition altogether. In his battle with Aphrodite of Pisces, Shun demonstrates perhaps the clearest evidence of his transcendent nature. The Gold Saint's deadly roses should have killed him instantly, yet Shun's blood, the very substance of his being, neutralized the poison. This wasn't simply physical resistance or narrative convenience. It was metaphysical statement that his very essence contained the antidote to corruption. Not because he fought against it, but because he existed in a state beyond its reach, a purity that wasn't absence of darkness, but transformation of it. The relationship between Shun and his cloth reveals something no other saint demonstrates. To the same degree, while all cloths respond to their wearer's cosmos, the Andromeda cloth shows unique properties of anticipation and adaptation. The conventional explanation suggests this is simply the special nature of this particular cloth. But consider the alternative, that the Andromeda cloth responds differently because it recognizes something in Shun that other cloths don't find in their saints. Not simply compatibility, but completion of a cosmic pattern begun before human history. When Saga's illusions trapped each saint in personalized psychological torment, Shun's ordeal revealed something profound about his true nature. While others struggled against external enemies made internal, Shun confronted the weight of his own unrealized potential. His greatest fear wasn't failure or inadequacy. It was the terrible responsibility of wielding power that could unmake reality itself. This wasn't standard heroic doubt, it was cosmic awareness. Not fear of being too weak, but recognition of being entrusted with too much. During the final confrontations in Elysium, the saints face divine beings whose understanding of cosmos should be absolute. Yet these eternal entities display confusion. When confronting Shun, subtle hesitations, moments of reassessment, the conventional reading interprets this as the gods underestimating a mere human. The deeper truth suggests something else: recognition. Not confusion at his human strength, but cosmic double-take at encountering something divine wearing human form, something older than themselves, something familiar yet impossible, like meeting your own creator. Throughout the series, the concept of the eighth sense represents the highest attainment of cosmic awareness, transcendence beyond death itself. Each saint struggles enormously to touch this state. But observe Shun's relationship with this transcendent awareness. While others battle toward it through extreme conditions, Shun's movements toward higher awareness appear almost like remembrance rather than discovery. Not learning something new, but recalling something forgotten. Not becoming, but returning to an original state that preceded his human form. The final evidence of Shun's true nature comes not from what the series explicitly states, but from what it conspicuously avoids. Throughout SaintSeiya, power scaling is a consistent narrative feature. Characters' relative strengths are clearly established, limitations are defined. Transcendence is marked by explicit statements and visual cues. Yet Shun's upper limits are never clearly shown. His full potential remains carefully undepicted. This isn't narrative oversight. It's deliberate avoidance of showing something the story itself recognizes as beyond its scope to contain. What does it mean when the most powerful being in the universe chooses to restrain rather than dominate? What truth did Shun embody that challenges everything we thought we understood about strength? His story wasn't just about a gentle soul forced to fight. It was about divine light voluntarily binding itself in human form, walking among warriors while carrying the secret of what transcends war itself. Not just another soldier in Athena's army, but the living embodiment of what even the gods still struggled to learn. That true power doesn't conquer opposition, it transforms it from within. In your own life, what power have you been afraid to recognize? What light within you remains bound by chains, not because it's weak, but because it's too vast to be unleashed without purpose? Shun's journey reminds us that sometimes what we perceive as our greatest weakness, our sensitivity, our reluctance to harm, our capacity for tears, might actually be the truest expression of something immeasurable within us. Something that doesn't need to prove itself through destruction because it knows itself through creation. If this revelation resonated within you, if you felt something awaken as we journeyed through the hidden truth of Shun's power, then you belong here with us. Like, subscribe, and join a community that sees beyond the surface of these stories, that recognizes the mythic truths hiding within characters society too quickly dismissed. Share this with someone whose power remains unacknowledged. Someone who needs to hear that gentleness isn't weakness, but might be the highest form of strength the universe knows. We give thanks for stories that speak to the deeper truths of our souls, for characters that remind us that true strength is often found in what the world mistakes for weakness. May we all awaken the power that resides within each of us, not for destruction, but for healing, not for dominance, but for transformation, not for war, but for the peace that transcends ordinary understanding. If this message awakened something within you, type in the comments, "I remember the power they tried to silence."